Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at D, E, and F. So once again, first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change from logarithmic form to exponential form. We're going to take the base number, which is 1/4. We're going to raise it to the y, and that's equal to x. Remember what we have is we have a vertical asymptote, and the vertical asymptote is x is equal to 0. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come up with our table of values. Remember, y is our independent variable, so we're picking our numbers for y, -1, 0, and 1. When we plug in a -1, what we're going to do is we're going to flip the 1/4 to a 4. When we plug a 0 in, anything to the 0 is 1. And when we plug a 1 in, we get a 1/4. So what we're going to do is we're going to graph. We have our vertical asymptote at 0. What we have is 4, -1. We have 1, 0, and we have 1/4 and 1. So that right there gives us, didn't quite make that point. Now, if we're looking at the domain and range, remember our domain starts at our asymptote. So that would be 0 to infinity. And our range is really easy because it goes up, it goes down. So it is going to be -infinity to infinity. Now, looking at the next one, we have to remember that ln is equal to log base e, meaning that when we change the form, it is e to the y is equal to x minus 1. When we add the 1, we get x is equal to e to the y plus 1, meaning that our vertical asymptote is going to be at 1. So it's x equals 1. Once again, what we have is our table of values. With our table of values, our y value, once again, is our independent variable. So what we have is we have -1, 0, and 1 again. When we plug in a -1, what we do is we flip it. And if you remember, when we flip it, what we're going to have is about 0.4. And if we add 1 to it, it's 1.4. Anything to the 0 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And when we plug in a 1, what we get is e, which is 2.7. And if we add 1, we get 3 points. So what we're going to do next is we're going to make our xy axis. And what we have is a vertical asymptote at 1. We have 1.4, -1. It's probably closer there. We have 2 and 0. And we have 3.7 and 1. And that right there gives us our graph. If we're looking at our domain this time starts at 1. Once again, the reason why it's a parenthesis is it doesn't reach 1. And our range, hopefully by now you have it down, -infinity to infinity. For our last one, letter F, what we're going to do is we're first going to add the 2. So we have f of x plus 2 is equal to log of 1/3, log base of 1/3 of x plus 1. We're going to change it to exponential form. How we're going to do that is we're going to put our base number at the bottom. Then what we have is f of x and plus 2 is equal to x plus 1. What we're going to do next is we're going to subtract the 1. So what we end up with is x is equal to 1/3 f of x plus 2, and then we subtract 1. So we have our vertical asymptote at x is equal to -1. We have our xy chart. Our numbers are going to be slightly different this time. Once again, if you're looking up here, we want that to be 0, which would be -2. That's our middle. So we're going to pick -3, and we're going to pick -1. If we plug in a -3, we get -1. That's the reciprocal of 1/3 is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. If we plug in a -2, -2 plus 2 is 0. Anything to the 0 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Then we plug in a -1. -1 plus 2 is 1. Stays the same. 1/3 minus 1 gives us -2/3. So what we're going to do next is we're going to make our xy axis. We're going to come up with our vertical asymptote, which we said is -1. Then what we're going to do is we have 2, -3. We have 0, -2. And we have -2/3 and -1. And that right there is our graph. Our domain, since we're starting at -1, we're going to go -1 to infinity. And our range is -infinity to